All right, guys, welcome back to Kevin Reads. Today, let's do a follow-up episode on the book called Range: Why Generalist Triumphs in a Specialized World. Today, I want to talk about paths to excellence, right? So, pretty much, I want to use some examples and trying to not tell you guys, discuss which way is better, right? Is take a generalist approach or take a specialized ways of approaching learning. As always, this is a video companion podcast to my real daily podcast. You guys can follow me on goodreads.com/Kevin Wong, and you guys can listen to the podcast on all of these platforms right here. All right, let's get right into it. So, what are some of the examples of a generalist approach, right? Like how can we test that? How can we find examples that take advantage of the generalist approach? And what it comes up to is actually parenting and education. And when we say education, guys, we can mean academic education, or we can also mean maybe learning a musical instrument or learning a sport, all that stuff. Right, so because you guys know I'm Asian, we have to talk about the tiger mom, right? So it's actually really interesting. The tiger mom phenomenon happened right after I came to the U.S. It's like I got to the U.S. and then like a month later, the Times magazine came up with the cover story, right? So pretty much, this tiger mom right here, Amy Chua, she got two daughters, right? She picked one daughter to do the piano. She picked the other daughter to do the violin. And then the daughter that she picked for the violin, she quit at 13, probably not that much older than this photo. And then her reasoning is, Mom, you paid it for me. Like, I did not do it for myself, right? So there, like the tiger mom sparked some intense cultural conversation, I remember back in that time. And I remember I got my new American high school friends asking me, "Hey Kevin, like, is your mom tiger mom?" I was like, "No, I don't think so." But for some reason, like Asian people are obsessed about piano and violin. My personal reasoning tells me that the reason they're obsessed with it is because the piano only have one player, and then violin has a ranking, right? The first violin, the second violin, blah, 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 blah. So when we are looking at this idea of a tiger mom, right, or mom forcing the kids to specialize, was the tiger mom story successful? Like, I think I did a little bit of a research on those two girls after the podcast. What happened was, I think Amy Chua, the tiger mom, teaches at Yale Law School, and then her daughters got into Yale because of that. Don't know if they deserve to go there or not. And then last year or 2 years ago, when the Supreme Judge Brett Kavanaugh was dealing with the sexual harassment controversies, I think Amy Chua defended Brett Kavanaugh in exchange for her children to clerk for him. So who knows? I think her mom is still controlling the daughter's life. But let's go back to the podcast, right? The path to success. Pretty much in the book, the thing that I picked out the most is very simple. First, to start with a sampling period, kind of trying everything. And then you find something that you like the most, and then you specialize in it. You have a very, very undivided attention to dive into that one thing. And in music field, in all other field, I think there are plenty of examples that will demonstrate that this is probably the way to go. I want to say this is a generalist approach that can lead to successful life. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that like something like a specialized like this, just trying to like find a certain person cannot work. But I think a generalist approach have a higher chances of working. For example, one of my favorite cellists, Yo Ma, he started with piano and then he learned the violin. He landed on cello the last, right? Like cello was his very last sampling instrument, and he loved it. right? And then he started a very focused, very specialized way of developing the skills with the cello, right? So when we say sampling, we usually mean learn different things and get experience in different things. For example, NBA players, right? They are very, very athletic. We know that. So they usually start to specialize to basketball right around, I want to say, maybe sophomore year, junior year of high school. Like throughout middle school or, during maybe freshman years of high school, they would play basketball in the winter, football in the fall, soccer or something in the spring, and then run track in the summer, right? So they're playing all the sports, and that's gonna be good for their hand-eye coordination, right? A Curry, right? That is a very, very unique example, I feel like, right? The coordination in that guy is crazy. And then right around maybe 16 or 17, they would specialize into basketball, right? We see it in many, many of the basketball stars these days. So if we consider those pathways, right? So when we have enough sampling periods or we have enough of a sample size, it's actually a really easy transition to a specialized or a focused field. The reason for that is since you have tried everything, you know which one you are good at, you know which area you should take advantage of, then you just do it, right? It's really very, very, very easy. So for the last part of this podcast, I want to dive in a little bit more into two of my probably most favorite genre in music. We have the classical music and we have the jazz music, right? So if you are consider yourself as a classically trained musician, you cannot, or it's very, very hard to transition into jazz. But if you consider yourself just like a jazz player, it's very, very easy to learn how to play classical music. The reason is that classical music gives you a lot of rules. So if you start to train as a classical pianist, let's use it as an example. When you are transitioning from classical music to jazz music, you are learning how to unlearn those rules. That's very hard because your mindset has already been done. Like it has been processed over and over again. But if you are coming from a jazz musician, you learn to improvise, then you are learning the rules. That tends to be easier. A second example is my favorite blues player, B.B. King, right? I recommend you guys listen to his song, Riding with the King. I think that was a collaboration with, I don't remember the guy's name, the rock and roll guy. Anyway, just search Riding with the King, and then he has a little bit of his life story in there. So he started playing, blues, the blues guitar probably like since he was in his early 20s, and he played till the day that he died, right? And he never really learned the guitar chord at all. Like, can you imagine, right? Or a second example is, the third example is Dave Boombach, probably one of the most famous quartet leaders back in the 50s. His one of the famous jazz music is Take 5. Well, in the beginning, Dave's mom actually tried to teach him classical piano, but he just won't practice. He just won't learn. He just won't know the rules. He just refused to learn the rules. So Dave Boombach actually learned how to play piano by trying to imitate a jazz player, a jazz pianist at a local bar. Right? That was in the 50s where little kids can go to the bar. That's not a problem. So my point is you have this talented musician that are in jazz or in blues. They never took rules. They never learned the rules from a classical pianist, but they still were able to become legendary, right? So by the very end, I would like to quote a very, very famous jazz player. He said that improvisation is kind of like a baby, right? Where you experience everything first and then you learn the rules after, right? Okay, I should do this, I should not be doing that, or I should do this. So in a sense that you are exploring as you go, you're learning as you go. There's no rules needed. I love that kind of analogy for jazz players. Okay, so what would be the kind of the goal, the take-home message, right? Like, what would be the message that I want to leave you guys with? It's actually very, very easy. Is that if you're comparing and contrasting, right, classical music and jazz music, the jazz musicians are truly the creative musician, and then the classical musicians are trying to recreative, right, or trying to recreate a creative music, right? Because the creative music was already written at the time of the composing hundreds of years ago, but they're just trying to add their own spin to it. So let's go back to this path to success page right here. Hopefully I have demonstrated enough of examples to convince you that from a generalist view to a specialized view, that it's actually a little bit more easier for everybody. All right, guys, thank you for listening. Bye.